In the fight for Oregon's 5th congressional district, a toss-up that could help decide which party controls Congress. Our next question is from Todd, and it's for Representative Janelle Bam.
State Rep Bynum, the 5th district, a healthy mix of urban and rural voters. More than 200,000 of its voters are nonpartisan or independent. Tonight, can you name 2 or 3 specific issues where you pledge to work across the aisle with Republicans if you're elected in November?
Well, I will continue to serve this district in a bipartisan way, just as I did when I worked on the CHIPS Act. So I will continue to work in the semiconductor and technological space. As I mentioned before, the bill that we did, SB 4, was a real opportunity for us to bring prosperity around the state. And I would say that what people have noted about me and my leadership is that I get the job done. I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. I make sure that we are including opinions from people who have a stake in what comes out and people who don't. What I also think is important to note is the work that we did during the George Floyd period on community safety. I worked across the aisle, made sure that my Republican counterpart, Ron Noble, who was the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, approved every single bill that committee generated that session. And that is bipartisanship that I did not have to lead on in the way that I did, but I absolutely made sure that he approved of every single bill. And I'm proud of that work.
Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, the question is about bipartisanship.
Well, my record speaks for itself. Certainly, I mentioned in the 300 plus bills that I'm either on or sponsored, over 84% of those are bipartisan. It's not just 1, 2, or 3 issues. It's all the issues. That's how we get good policy, being center forward, pragmatic, thoughtful thinkers and independent thinkers. It is not about identity politics in Congress, and it shouldn't be. And I have pledged to do that. I did it 2 years ago when I said I was going to, and I have walked the walk. When it comes to bipartisanship that my opponent mentions, you know, I talked to Ron Noble after she mentioned that last time, and I thought to myself, that's not the story I got. And you know what? It certainly wasn't. And when I talked to him, he always felt like he had just the worst of 2 choices. Never really heard. So, you know, it's unfortunate that she's mischaracterizing that it's bipartisanship, but you do not have people come in and testify before you in a Judiciary Committee and never give them time to talk. Our law enforcement officers have said the same thing. I just don't call, she's not being authentic in her characterization of bipartisanship.
Ms. Bynum, I'm sure that you would like to respond to that.
I think some people have a different memory of what happened, and I know that I was very, very clear. Ron Noble rubber stamped everything that we did.
Because he had no choice.
And there are choices. We have choices as legislators to support a bill or to not support a bill, to raise your hand, to not raise your hand. The letters that were written in support of every single bill we had are in the public record. To get amnesia is to be disloyal to this state.
Patrick has a question now, and we'll start with Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer for the answer. Patrick?
Congresswoman, you have been criticized by some constituents in your district for not holding town halls or engaging enough with citizens. How do you respond to these observations? Well,
it's nonsense. You know, there are many ways to talk to the voters and talk to our constituents. I'm on the ground every single week going back and forth between Washington and here. We reach out all the time. I have phone calls with mayors groups. I have phone calls with Clackamas County commissioners, Deschutes County commissioners, making sure that I'm touching base with them of what's happening on the ground. You know, I do teletown halls. I think we held 8 of them where we reached thousands of people every single day. It's very effective to get more people than we can you know, in a local room. Now, the group that's coming up, I will have to say, the one group that keeps criticizing me is Indivisible. You know, and they're a group that's all about defunding the police and really no law and order, and it's just ridiculous. They do it across the nation. It's just something to try to expose bad practice. But I take this job very seriously. I work with my team often on how best to reach our voters. I've done a really good job of that, and so the criticism is only a political hit, and I look forward to continue to talk to my voters. I'm never afraid to answer the call.
Representative Bynum, your thoughts on connecting with the voters?
I think this is my specialty. I'm really proud to have had a number of town halls, whether they were just general topics or on a specific topic. I mentioned one before that we had on fentanyl. But one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is doing what I call my taco town halls, and where the group brings the tacos, they set the agenda, and I come. And it happened because I was going to town halls so much, and I was coming home hungry, not taking care of myself. So I have really enjoyed that. And then the other thing that I did, it was a suggestion of one of the legislators from Gresham. She would do walking meetings. So when I was in district, I would do walking town halls. And it was just one-on-one. So I would meet at Clackamas High School and walk the track. And you could set up a time with me for 15 minutes. And I would meet at Clackamas Town Center Mall. And so these were opportunities to meet with me. I didn't have to necessarily meet with the top people in the county, but I could meet with everyday people and they could tell me what was on their minds.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to the topic of election integrity. And first, we have a viewer question. This one will go first to Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer. Now, this viewer asks, I want to know whether Lori Chavez-DeRemer believes that Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election.
Yes, I do believe that.
Short answer to that question. And you've been a supporter of former President Trump. Are you supporting him in his campaign this time around?
Yes, and there's a reason for that. The policies that we have suffered through the last 3.5 years under the Biden-Harris administration, and people are tired of. Again, public safety, closing the border, fentanyl on the streets, housing affordability, costs to live, everyday prices. We need to get back to those policies. And if it's on the southern border, it's remain in Mexico and Title 42. We want to have more money in our pockets for our residents here in Oregon. People want to keep more of their own money. They don't want to continue to have high taxes. My opponent voted 9 times to raise taxes here in Oregon. We've had enough of it. And so we want to make sure that we have a strong leader, and that is why. Those policies are important to Oregonians.
Representative Bynum.
My son and I had an encounter about a couple of months ago, and he was trying out for the high school soccer team. And I went to get him up. It was an evening tryout period. They were holding clinics to kind of get the kids in shape and see how fast you could run. And I went to get him up, and he told me that he didn't feel like going that night. And I was like, well, you have to go. Even if you don't feel good, you have to go. And you want to make sure that they know that you want to be on the team. And he was like, well, Mom, it's optional. And I was like, son, if they tell you it's optional, it's not. And we went back and forth, and this is me with a 13-year-old. And I tell this story because I want to alert voters that this election is not optional. Codifying Roe is not optional. Educational options, not optional. The environment, not optional. And one voter told me this weekend that they had finally figured out what wasn't optional for them. It was the truth. And Trump doesn't tell the truth.
Now we have another question. This one goes to Janelle Bynum. Just yesterday, Oregon's DMV found another 302 ineligible people accidentally registered to vote here in Oregon. While only 5 of those ineligible voters are known to have cast a ballot, more than 1,500 have now been mistakenly registered. You've called for an investigation on this. Are you convinced that Oregon's elections are safe and fair?
I'm an engineer, and I believe in trust but verify, right? And so I've called for an investigation. I think wherever the errors are made, we need to put systems in place to catch those errors more quickly. And whoever is responsible should be held accountable. I don't think Oregonians should allow accountability to take a back seat in this state. It should be front and center, and I'll stand up for that each and every day.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, what were your thoughts about the DMV registering ineligible voters?
Yeah, it's unfortunate for free and fair elections. That's what people count on. That's what people, it's the backbone of America, talking about democracy. We wrote a letter to the Secretary of State asking for the accountability of why that happened under Tina Kotek and the state legislature. Why is this allowed to happen? So we want to make sure that we're supporting that. I will expect those answers back. I also voted for the SAVE Act, making sure that American citizens are the ones that are voting, because this, again, will deteriorate people's faith in the system. And as Oregonians, we don't want that. I don't want that. I would imagine my opponent doesn't want that. So we need to get to the bottom of this, but we've done the work. We've written the letters. We've asked the hard questions. We cannot have people voting in elections if they're not American citizens and allowed to vote.
Patrick, you have a question regarding gun rights.
Yes. According to Pew Research Center, 48,830 people died from gun-related injuries in the U.S. in 2021, the most recent year for which complete data is available. How should Congress address gun violence in the United States?
And we'll start this answer with Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer.
Well, certainly we want to make sure that we're addressing people who shouldn't have guns, have access to them. We're talking about people who commit felonies, people who've been investigated, making sure that we can find out who that is. Protecting our Second Amendment as well. We heard even our VP talk about that they have a gun for defense and home, and most will. But we want to make sure that those guns are in the right hands. One of the things I want to allude to, though, to keep our streets safer, because they haven't been under my opponent, soft on crime, but she has voted to reduce criminals who've been charged with felonies to misdemeanors, which then gives them access to those guns. So I find that that's counterintuitive if we want to have safety on our streets. I don't think that this district wants soft on crime, and that's where my opponent has been, and this is just another attempt at doing so by reducing those crimes, voting on it from felonies to misdemeanors.
And Representative Bynum, your thoughts on gun rights?
Well, my opponent's idea that I'm soft on crime just proves that I live rent-free in her head. The boyfriend loophole was something that I supported overturning in the Oregon State Legislature. And as a mother, I'm very concerned that our children are continuously being subjected to being shredded by automatic weapons. We can't continue to say, my thoughts and prayers are with you, and then allow deranged gunmen to come into schools and then trick ourselves into believing that one lone police officer can handle someone with an automatic weapon. Like this to me is the issue of our century when it comes to protecting our children, and we still have not moved forward on it. I will be a staunch advocate for children. I will be a staunch advocate for making sure that mental health supports are in place and that we fund law enforcement, which my opponent has voted several times to not fund a law enforcement budget, cutting 30% of the U.S. government's budget.
That's not true.
Would you like to rebut? You
Absolutely.
have 30 seconds.
Actually, I have supported and co-sponsored the Protect and Invest Act for our law enforcement officers to give them the tools. That's exactly why I'm endorsed by all the law enforcement agencies in the state of Oregon. Again, a failed decade of policies where she has built the relationships apparently with law enforcement and public safety officers, but they're not endorsing her. Why? Because in my 22 short months, I have made sure that they have the tools that they need to protect people on the street. So she is soft on crime. She doesn't want to admit it, but she took votes in the legislature to give rapists less time, the victims, to file that claim. She's rather protect rapists and rioters than do what's right for the public safety of our streets.
I have to call time there and give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Sure. My opponent is trying to cover up the fact that she supports former President Trump, who has been convicted 34 times of felonies and has credibly been accused of sexual assault. She is trying to cover up her support of President Trump, and that is why she's going to this mantra of soft on crime. She is standing by her man.
Your record proves it.
She is standing by her man. She's the one that's soft on crime and wants to turn a blind eye.
Just the accusation of just being in the pocket of President Trump.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Nonsense. And it's kind of laughable because, again, my bipartisanship, my record, my independent thinking, I have stood up to that. I think there was a comment about, how are you going to go against President Trump? Well, first of all, I've never even met President Trump, one. But two, let me tell you one thing. Making sure that our government stays funded. Again, he spoke up about that, I think, at one point where he was like, let's shut it down. Absolutely not. We have to make sure that we're funding our government. And I voted every single time to make sure our government stays open. We have military families to pay for. We have to make sure that we're national security issues. So it's just nonsense. And again, whether you want to call it a club or not, it's building those relationships to do that policy forward, pragmatic, thoughtful thinking. And that's what I work on in Congress.
I have to call time now. And Todd.
Yeah, State Rep Bynum, just to follow up here, but back in 2020, you did start pushing through a number of bills that did reshape law enforcement authority in the state. So what do you say to voters who might worry about your general support of law enforcement?
My general support is as a daughter of the granddaughter of a police officer. My general stance is that we all experience law enforcement in this state differently. And we have to hear how each community experiences it. And until I started working with Senator Lou Frederick, as well as members of the BIPOC caucus, we were not having conversations about how the Constitution, whether it was the Oregon Constitution or the federal Constitution, is being unevenly applied here in Oregon.
Thank you very much. I have a question concerning what's happening in the Middle East right now. What would be your thoughts about our continued support of Israel as they are in the conflict with Lebanon and also with Hezbollah, as well as other groups in the Middle East? Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, there's a lot going on on that front right now. What would you say about our support of Israel?
Well, I've supported Israel from day one. Yesterday was the one-year anniversary of a very tragic day in Israel, October 7th. We have to support our ally in Israel. They're fighting a war not only on the south with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah to the north, and with the Houthis in Yemen. And Iran is taking the lead on that through their proxies. I went to Israel in April. I visited with the IDF to make sure that they had the tools they need and listened to Prime Minister. I met with Hirsch Goldberg's family. I met them while they had the 181st day when their son was taken as an American hostage, and now he is gone. We will support our allies. We will continue to. I will always support Israel. They have a right to defend themselves because they do not want to be massacred like they were on October 7th a year ago. We should never live through this again.
Representative Bynum, our relationship as a nation with Israel.
Well, first, I think the events of October 7th were horrific. I do believe the United States should continue to stand with its ally, Israel, and Israel absolutely has a right to defend herself. What I think the question is for me is, number one, making sure that, like, as a mother, I see that there's pain all around that region, but there's also pain around the world. This is a matter of democracy versus autocracy. So we're seeing this not just in the Middle East, we're seeing this with Ukraine, we're seeing this in places like Haiti. These international issues should be concern for every American, because if we can't defend democracy in Israel, then we are in big trouble, because those guns are pointed right at us as well.
Should we continue, as a follow-up, should we continue to provide offensive weapons to Israel in order to defend themselves, and to the level that we have been doing to this point?
Yes, this is an issue. We're talking about making sure that they have the capabilities to protect us. They are fighting a war on also behalf of America and the United States. But we don't want our men and women going to war. We don't want another ground war. We don't need another failed Afghanistan. What we need is to make sure that we're supporting our allies in their fight against Hamas. And we have to, the Iron Dome, the technology that comes out of Israel to protect themselves, we have to make sure that they have the funds that they need to reinforce that Iron Dome. We saw the barrage of missiles that were coming in. If we don't make sure that that's fully funded, we're going to see an all-out war.
Representative Bynum, continue to supply Israel with the weapons that they need?
I agree.
You agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. Todd, we have another question.
Yeah, State Rep Bynum, there have been recent allegations of you not reporting Stafford tied to your 22 campaign for sexual harassment. We just want to give you an opportunity to respond to that tonight.
Sure. As a mother, I am deeply concerned when any young person in a workplace has an issue. I'm a mom of kids who are going into the workforce. And so when I was asked to report something, I did to the employer. And the employer is the one that is supposed to be accountable. I expected them to do their work, and I think that this is important. It's not a small thing to experience something negative at work, and I think it's important for the people who are supposed to investigate. This employer was Future PAC. I have every expectation that they will do their jobs.
Should you have done more at the time?
I think I did everything that I could have and was supposed to do. I'm 100% confident in that.
Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, you actually issued a statement after this came out. What do you think now, standing next to Representative Bynum and hearing her explanation of what happened?
Well, I take it, you know, it shocks me actually, because every statement starts with "as a mother." As a mother, if that was your child, you wouldn't stop and hope somebody else took the lead. As a mandatory reporter, and that's the issue here, you know the responsibility of a mandatory reporter. That means you talk to law enforcement and you let them do the investigation. It's not enough to go tell somebody else to do the job. So it doesn't really, A to B, that doesn't work for me. And again, I think it speaks to the failed leadership again, supporting oftentimes the perpetrator as opposed to the victim. I do not find it in the best interest of Oregonians to support the rapist over the victim, to support the rioter over the victims, to support a sexual harassment by teachers to their students and protect the teacher. I do not find it best for Oregonians that she'll protect the perpetrator on this and not the young girl, the girl who came to her and said there's a problem. That to me is a lack of leadership, failed leadership, and it's a disturbing pattern.
You obviously have a rebuttal for that.
Yeah, you have fantasies that I can't help, and she has incorrect information. What I think is really important is that the Congresswoman is attempting again to cover up for the fact that she supports someone who has been credibly accused of sexual assault. She is still attempting to cover up the fact that she's looking away from his 34 felony convictions. As I said before, I'm a mother. This couldn't be closer to my heart.
So you're blaming me. You're blaming me for your failed leadership, and you're blaming me for your lack of reporting?
I'm talking with the moderator. What I think is important is that people who are entrusted to do their job actually do their job. And that is what I asked of the investigation. I have every expectation that they will do what they're supposed to do. I should be able to count on government to be able to do that.
We have a final question, and for this one, before we get to closing statements, rather, 30 seconds to answer this one.
For both of you, climate change is considered by many to be one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue of our time. There's a hurricane that's bearing down on the East Coast right now. Congresswoman, you mentioned earlier that this is something that you have worked on in your time in Congress, but there are members of your caucus who still deny that climate change exists. So I wonder, how do you work with the people who disagree with you on that issue and who are part of your own party?
And again, 30 seconds on this.
Yeah, well, certainly it's an important issue. And if anybody's going to deny that, I think they don't have the facts and figures. We have the data that supports it, and we have to make sure that we're working with policy forward and center forward. So again, I work bipartisan across this. It's important to Oregonians. It's important to young people. I've worked with multiple different energy companies on what that looks like, whether we're talking about hydrogen, we're talking about nuclear, we're talking about wind and solar, how important all of that is to make sure that we're addressing not only climate change, but still being able to grow the economy. And we're finally starting to see that convergence together, where this is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It's something that we want to protect our environment, and I'll continue to work on that.
Representative Bynum.
It couldn't be clearer to me that we're in a climate crisis. In 2020, our family had to escape the wildfires that came within 3 miles of our house. Our children have asthma. The sky was orange. It was an experience that I'll never forget. I think the climate deniers are finally having to come to terms, especially as we look at the hurricane response. And this is something that Republicans have turned a blind eye to over and over again. I don't see any distinction with my opponent.
Now it's time for closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute for their closing statement, and the order was decided randomly before this debate began. So Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, you will go first for your closing statement.
Well, again, thank you to people who are watching. This is an important debate. This is an important seat for Oregon. I am grateful to serve as the Congresswoman. Work hard. I think I stepped up 2 years ago because I promised Oregonians that they could trust me, that I would work hard every single day, that I would focus on the local issues, and that I would fight with integrity. I'm supported by Republicans, Democrats. I have a large labor endorsements with over 20 unions who know that I want to grow this economy, and I also want to make sure that they have fair wages, that they can afford their homes, that they can protect their kids, that they can choose the education system that they want. You know, I've worked and coalesced with a lot of my colleagues here in Oregon as well, working with the other congressmen, because Oregon matters first. And I promised that I would take that story to Washington, D.C., and not vice versa. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to serve every single day. I ask for your vote, and I look forward to serving you again in the 119th Congress.
Representative Bynum, your closing statement.
Thank you for having us both here today. Again, I'm Janelle Bam. I'm a mother of 4 who loves sports. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a small business owner and a 4-term state legislator. I'm running because Washington is broken. We have a do-nothing Congress that is producing absolutely nothing for the American people. We have Lori Chavez-DeRemer, who's had an opportunity to bring home things to Oregon that will help our economy, that will help our state, that will help working families. And she's failed to do that. In preparing for tonight's event, I was wondering, would we see the MAGA extremist Lori show up, or the Trump-loving, do-nothing Lori? And I don't know exactly what showed up, but I know that I am the person that is supported by working families. I'm a champion for them. I'm a champion for children. I'm a champion for Roe. I'm a champion for the environment. And I'm ready to roll my sleeves up and get to work.
Thank you both. And that concludes tonight's debate. I'd like to thank both candidates for being here. Here are some dates that you need to know concerning this election. You have until 1 week from today to register to vote. Ballots will be mailed out later this month, and all ballots must be postmarked by Election Day to be counted. Election Day is November 5th this year. We have another important debate coming up next week for Washington's 3rd Congressional District. This is with incumbent Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Republican challenger Joe Kent. This is a rematch of 2 years ago. You can catch that next Monday at 7 o'clock here on KOIN 6 with myself and KOIN's own Lisa Balick moderating that one. Now, if you want to go back and watch or rewatch the full debate here tonight, you'll be able to find it in full on KOIN.com, along with both candidates' appearances on our Sunday show, Eye on Northwest Politics. I again want to thank both candidates for taking part tonight, along with our panelists Todd Unger and Patrick Malee. Good night. Thanks for watching.